Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we are lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church, and will defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we begin our next series within the series on traitor priests, and here you are going to hear some things that are going to shock you to your core. Welcome, Brother Alexis.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure. And in this multi-part investigation on the U.S. government's doctrinal war against the Catholic Church, we've been featuring in detail the phases. Henry Luce, who was the man who thought up the whole thing, his wife, the Mata Hari, Ruth Luce. And last episode, we talked about Archbishop Gibbons in Ireland and how they prepared the way by promoting Americanism. So in this program, we're going to talk about how priests actually cooperated with the U.S. government in taking down the Catholic Church from within. And this is going to, when you hear the names mentioned, you're going to rewrite your entire history of the Catholic Church in the United States. So were American priests and prelates more loyal to America than to Rome?
Yeah, they were. And
what can you say about on that topic, AJ, from your investigation?
Well, it says here, it looked as though America was turning Catholic. In reality, the Catholics never had a chance. The leadership sold them out by pleasing first the wealthy and the successful laity, who were not about to change a system that allowed them to achieve material success. Even the prelates and priests who were not over the Americanists were loyal first to America and not to Rome.
So this is the fundamental problem, that we've been betrayed from within, and this is why the Catholic Church in America is going nowhere except down. So now let's start naming some of the big boys. Have you ever heard of Cardinal Spellman? My mother grew up in New Jersey, and she'd praise Cardinal Spellman to the skies in my youth. She always talking about, oh, Cardinal Spellman, what a wonderful man he was. But Cardinal Spellman wasn't as wonderful in the eyes of Christ as he seemed to us, was he?
First, he served when asked by FDR as the military vicar of the armed forces during World War II. When that was ended, he enlisted as an ardent anti-communist in the war against communism, known as the Cold War. His efforts were in harmony with those of the American intelligence community, whether it was the OSS in 1940, Africa and the Middle East during the World War II, or the Central Agency in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. He provided information to the CIA on John the 23rd, successor, and assisted J. Edgar Hoover in the FBI when asked. As behest of Harry Truman, he traveled to Latin America to convince the Catholics there to change their votes in the United Nations to recognize Israel, a mission which led to the deaths of millions, and one of which Spellman later regretted. That part I really doubt.
But the fact that he gave information to the U.S. government on John the 23rd, that is not the role of a cardinal to inform on the Pope. I mean, that's outrageous. It's totally inappropriate. He should have refused it entirely and said, it's none of your business. He's our Pope. I'm not going to inform him. But the fact that he went to Latin America to try to convince Catholics to get their votes in the UN changed to recognize the state of Israel, that has nothing to do with the Catholic faith. So I can imagine he was promised money. And so did he have a friendship with Henry Luce, the guy who came up with the idea with doctrinal warfare against the Catholic Church?
Friendship? Yeah, maybe other things.
What was their relationship like?
Lewis's biographer, W.A. Swanberg, writing a few years after Lewis's death, noted that Spellman was Lewis's good friend, that he worked tirelessly in opposing communism, certainly one of Lewis's ardent passions. Spellman's residence in New York, Swanberg observed, was perhaps a horizontal 200 yards from Lewis's penthouse. The proximity as well as the ideological affinity between the two men led Spellman to occasionally drop in on Lewis so the two could go for a walk.
I'll walk together. Okay, so here we have, he's not saying it explicitly. This is back in the 50s and 60s, but you often wonder why the pro-gay bishops and cardinals in America are the most allied with the U.S. government on questions of welfare, immigration. Maybe it has something to do with Cardinal Spellman. And maybe Spellman was serving U.S. government because he was being blackmailed by Luce.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Spellman had some. What this behavior is just totally outrageous for a cardinal of the Roman Church, who should be in Rome more often than he's in the house of a CIA agent that's planning the destruction of the Catholic Church. I think that's obvious. But he was also known to have gotten involved in rehabilitating a rather scurrilous character, Bishop Bonaventure Broderick, at the request of Paul VI, who was also infamous for his own personal dissolute behavior.
Yeah.
Who was Bishop Bonaventure Broderick, and what did Pius X do to him?
Well, he was auxiliary bishop to Cuba. He got the job because his former teacher in the seminary remembered him all those years later.
And took him as his private secretary as soon as he became Bishop of Havana.
Mm-hmm.
That's very suspicious, especially because Broderick probably didn't speak Spanish. He was a Irish priest from Connecticut.
Yeah. And was it maybe 1 or 2 years later, Pius X, so-called Wikipedia says, sacked him because of misinformation. But
yeah, misinformation on fundraising, yes.
why would he then leave the priesthood and work at a gas station for 30 years?
Yeah, so this is a thing. In the old code, you would be sacked as a bishop only for things like heresy. That would require a trial, or if you had a child out of wedlock and it was a known fact, and then you would be dismissed. And I guess you'd have to go into the secret archives. But Pius X is a Canaanite saint. He must have had good reasons. It's very sketchy in the Wikipedia article, and there's a lot more information at Bishop Broderick's tombstone on Find a Grave, interestingly enough, taken from a book written by a Jesuit who was trying to rehabilitate him. So it's pretty clear that Pius X found that this guy was totally corrupt and immoral and kicked him out of the episcopacy only 2 years after making him a bishop. And that's a saint. You didn't see John Paul II do anything like that. You didn't see Paul VI do anything like that. You didn't see John the 23rd, John Paul I, or Pius XII, as far as I know, do anything like that. So that's Pius X, great man.
Yep.
And then years later, Paul VI, when he was in the Secretary of State under Pius XII, wrote Spellman and said, "Why don't you help rehabilitate this guy?" Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and he died before he was able to take up the role as the new auxiliary bishop of New York City.
Yeah. I like the part of the story where Spellman claims to have accidentally discovered Bishop Broderick running a gas station. Accidentally. Yeah. And so that shows you that things were beginning to change before the Second Vatican Council. So Paul VI, Montini, that was his name before he became Pope, was already trying to rehabilitate some of the most scurrilous people in the episcopacy. And after Vatican II, we'll see all the honorable men kicked out of the episcopacy or sidelined. And this goes on today, even with Archbishop Lenga and Bishop Rafida. And some of the most scurrilous ones allowed to propagate their errors and scandals before the on the stage of the world. It's really shameful. There were others in the Catholic Church in the United States who worked to corrupt the youth and get them under Masonic control. And the next we'll speak about is Bishop Bernard J. Scheele. Who was he and what did he do, AJ?
Okay, so Bishop Bernard J. Shiel was the auxiliary bishop of Chicago, Illinois, under the Cardinal Mundelein. He created Catholic Scouting. He created the National Conference of Catholic Youth Organization, or CYO.
And ostensibly, this was to promote the Catholic faith among youth, but what was its real purpose?
To promote the Americanist agenda, promote the policies of FDR to indoctrinate the youth, and still does today.
To make them think America was the end-all, be-all of human civilization, and that the way Catholics were in the United States was the way Catholics should be everywhere.
Yep.
And we see that today. There's you mentioned last program. You mentioned again there was he has a doctorate in theology, graduated from the Gregorian, and Bergoglio promotes everyone from the Gregorian. But he's a layman, and just 6 years ago he was selling skateboards with images of Our Lady on them. He was like totally unknown. Now he's writing editorials for Crisis magazine, and he's pushing the Americanist agenda, and he's going up like a rising star out of nowhere. But he's following this narrative line, and he's not kicking against it. So, ironically, Scheele stabs in the back a very famous priest that everyone's heard about, and ends up getting it himself. So, Father Charles Coughlin, what do we know about him? How famous was he? And what did Scheele and Mundelein do to him?
So, let me go look it up. So, Father Coughlin did the unthinkable back then. He spoke against FDR.
Father Coughlin was known as the radio priest. He was one of the most famous priests in all of the United States in the 30s. And
he founded the National Shrine of the Little Flower of Saint Therese of Lisieux. He just a priest everyone should have been like.
And I think his radio discourses have been published in book form, and if you can get a hold of them, they're very good, solid stuff.
And so he embarrassed FDR and needed to be silenced, and Scheele was one to do it. In a speech delivered in December 1938 at the request of Mundelein, Scheele said, "As an American citizen, Father Coughlin has the right to express his personal views on current events, but he is not authorized to speak for the Catholic Church, nor does he represent the doctrine or sentiments of the Church. The Catholic leadership in the U.S. willingly turned on its own to please the powerful private interests who were intent on war with Germany."
So this might sound familiar to you. If you know any good priest who has been canceled or silenced, as we used to say, silenced, it's the exact same excuse. You don't represent the Catholic Church. You're not authorized to speak. The church doesn't teach or believe what you say, or doesn't teach and believe what they say either. But that's their standard way of character assassinating anyone. And what they're basically saying is, all you faithful Catholics, don't you listen to him, or you're going to displease us, your bishops. And if you are totally uninformed and think your bishops are actually Catholic and your pastors leading you to Christ, and don't realize they're actually in league with the Freemasons to destroy the Catholic Church, that's enough to get you to turn the radio off. And that was the end of Father Coughlin, his popularity. And that's an extremely diabolic and wicked thing. And divine providence arranged that Scheele would get the knife in the back too, because what happened to Scheele under Bishop John Knoll?
So 2 years later, Shiel fell out of favor in the late 1940s when refused to be sufficiently anti-communist. In a letter to Bishop John Knoll of the Diocese of Fort Wayne, Shiel complained, "I am somewhat perturbed over what I can only consider your overemphasis of the communist danger. Undoubtedly, communism is a danger. I am well aware of that. Undoubtedly, it is a potent threat to everything we of the Catholic Church hold dear. Yet I believe that your great concern over this danger and threat is out of all proportion to the strength and influence of communism. I have always believed that communism is no danger in a society where justice and charity prevail. Communism, I believe, is no threat in a decent and human economic structure."
And then, so what happened to Scheele? Was he
So Shiel was savaged in the media and abandoned by Francis Cardinal Spellman, was once an ardent supporter of his, and Shiel disappeared from the public scene and was retired by his bishop, Samuel Cardinal Stritch of Chicago.
And notice now the hypocrisy. So we're in the 40s. It's the Cold War, late 40s, and the government wants this guy silenced. But we're going to see in the 70s, the whole thing turns around. Bishops who start speaking in favor of communism start getting praised and promoted. And this is because the Freemasons had found and learned that promoting communism was the quicker way to destroy Christianity. So it was about in the early 70s that there was still that leftover strong anti-communism. I remember the Blue Army was of Our Lady of Fatima was promoted as being anti-communist. The message of Fatima was preached as meaning solely to oppose communism. And then as the 70s passed, that all went out of vogue, and it was like liberation theology and reinterpreting the gospel in a Marxist light. And if you were pushing that, you got promoted in the Catholic Church, whereas just 20 years, 30 years later, you would be sidelined. So did the American bishops all of a sudden change? No. It's the money they were receiving told them to do the exact opposite, and so they did it because they have no convictions on their own. But this is not all of it. There were bishops and priests who actually did spying for the FBI, and they were actually agents and published propaganda material for the U.S. government. Who are these Judas Iscariots of the American Church?
Yeah, so here's the first list. One such example was Father John F. Cronin, assisted by Spellman and Bishop John F. O'Hara, former president of the University of Notre Dame. Bishop O'Hara provided Cronin with enormous resources. Cronin spied on priests and labor leaders to determine who might be a communist sympathizer, authored numerous reports useful to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and tried to get various Catholic priests and bishops to agree on a common set of social principles that invariably supported the American agenda.
Father Cronin. I'll point out just from the start that a priest and a bishop should not inform on anyone in the church to a government. And why is that? Because they hear confessions. And humanly speaking, it's impossible to remember every fact where you heard it from. And if you should reveal to the government some fact that you might have heard in confession, you're violating the seal and you are excommunicated. And it's a grave mortal sin. So priests cannot get involved in that role, no matter how politically he might personally be convinced that it's a righteous thing to do because of the conflict of interest he has. He has the care of souls in the internal forum. So Father Cronin, I've heard of Father Cronin. He's rather well known. You see publications that mention him from before the council. So the idea that before the council, the American Church was in a good order is just a complete myth. Who's the next on the list?
So these are the actual agents of J. Edgar Hoover now. His agents spied on the bishops as well and gathered enormous amounts of data on them, which helped Hoover develop these relationships. The list of Hoover bishops included John Cardinal O'Hara, president of the University of Notre Dame from 1934 to 1939, Archbishop Michael Curley of St. Augustine, Florida, Richard Cardinal Cushing of Boston, Bishop John Knoll, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, Spellman, and Patrick Cardinal of Boyle. Through these and other prelates, the FBI and the elites they served gained influence over the minds of Catholics in higher education, in the rank and file through publications like Our Sunday Visitor. With the bishop's support, it is easier for the FBI and hence the U.S. government to get information to spy on fellow Catholics and other segments of the population which it had limited contact. Father Edward Conway, Jesuit, conducted information gathering and other operations on behalf of the FBI in connection with the country's atomic energy program. Monsignor Charles Owen Rice performed similar work when it came to organized labor in the CIO. U.S. Catholic Church leaders were clearly on the side of the U.S. government and the American elite.
And the great big problem with this is the American government is run by the Masons. So if you give them information about a Catholic priest, thinking that they're going to use that to, arrest him for illegal activities, they might very well use that to blackmail him.
Yeah.
To do nefarious things. Why is it that so much child abuse went on in the Church in the United States and no police, no FBI, no federal or state prosecutor intervened until the time was ripe to destroy the church because they opposed abortion and gay marriage? Ask yourself that.
Yeah.
And was the U.S. government totally unaware of what was going on? Or did they file everything away because the church with these bishops were seen as collaborators in an intelligence operation?
And that one bishop we know very well about, Bishop Fulton J. Sheen.
So what was Fulton J. Sheen's role? I think everyone is going to be absolutely horrified to think this man was informing someone to the FBI. What was he doing?
His role was to gather information, to spy, to put out propaganda information, books, pamphlets, to do the government's dirty work.
So if you're a fan of Archbishop Fulton Sheen and you admire his talks, maybe you should start wondering why this one Catholic bishop was given access to mass media, a television program, I think it was even nightly. Why was he allowed to speak and when so many were not allowed to speak? And why is it in the Catholic Church in America this has never happened again? To find out he was an FBI informant, I think will make you reassess whether what this guy was preaching was the Catholic faith or was it tinged with Americanism. I know Sheen is highly admired among many religious, and I have actually heard a talk by Fulton Sheen where he said, if you suffer, you can merit to get to heaven, even if you don't have Christian faith, which is utter heresy. And if Fulton Sheen preached heresy, he cannot be canonized or beatified. He's a heretic. But if he actually gathered information for the FBI, then he in no way can be raised to the altars because that would be a virtue in a Catholic state but in a Masonic state, it is highly suspicious.
Mhm. And that is the first part of this new series on Traitor priests.
Now, AJ, remind the audience again where you're finding all this information, the name of the book, where they can get it, because a lot of people are going to say, "What? Wait a moment, I want to look at the facts."
Let's see here. There we go. Here's the book, and I'll tell you the name. John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and American Proposition. How the CIA's doctrinal warfare program changed the Catholic Church, by David A. Wimhoff, a lawyer in South Bend, Indiana, and a law school professor at the University of Notre Dame.
Yeah, so this isn't just anyone. This is a highly skilled professional who went in through Freedom of Information Acts, all the government documents. These are not idle accusations. It's all documented. And this book is full of documents, and it's like, what, 900 pages?
Yeah.
So if you're a Catholic in the United States and you want to know what really went on in the 20th century, you've got to get this book. You got to read it. I would say that every Catholic in high school should read this book. So you realize once and for all that neither the Republican nor the Democratic parties, neither the FBI, the CIA, or anyone in the U.S. government is your friend. They're in fact your enemy and have declared war on you in 1953. And I think we'll be covering that in the actual decision to go to war and what it entailed in one of the upcoming episodes. So, do we have any more traitors to talk about, or we're going to cover the actual declaration of war in our next program?
The next traitor priest we'll be covering is Father John Courtney Murray himself.
Oh yeah, we have to do a whole program on this guy, this Jesuit, who is the intellectual brain behind the destruction of the whole concept of Catholicism in the minds of Americans who are members of the Catholic Church.
Yep.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Ordo Militaris Radio TV for this very important investigatory series.
You're welcome. So please go get the book. It's linked on the show page on every of the show pages we do for the programs in this book. It's $59 for a 900 page, well done hardcover book, full of documents, notes, everything where you got it. Go get the book. And stay tuned for our next episode on John Courtney Murray. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.